a pattern interrupt will become popular, and then it becomes the pattern. So it's like,
Right.
okay, my pattern interrupt is now the same as these 5,000 other people doing the exact same pattern interrupt, and it just becomes instantly like scrollable, like you said. So it's like one of those things where, for me, I'm always like, how can I come up with sort of my own way to be interesting rather than copying what is super popular right now?
Hey, welcome to the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast on the B Podcast Network. This is a podcast dedicated to helping higher ed marketers tell better stories, create better content, and enroll more students. My name is John Azzoni. I'm the founder at Unveiled, and we are a video production company working specifically with college marketing teams on helping them tell student success stories all year long through a subscription approach. And you can learn more at unveiled.tv. That's UNVEILD. Or if you want to chat directly with me, you can find me on LinkedIn or find my contact info on the contact page of our website. My guest today is Mike Richeson. Mike is the founder of a video production company called Homestead Production, and they work with clients in a variety of industries. But don't waste your time trying to Google Homestead Production because they don't have a website. And as you'll learn in this episode, that's a strategic choice. In addition to being a talented video content creator, Mike's also a very talented marketer and thought leader in the content creation space. So keep listening to learn how building a B-roll library is essential to get the most out of your content marketing and social media efforts. Also, how your content is just a blip on the radar when someone is scrolling, and the importance of capturing attention. You'll also learn about pattern interruptions, what makes a good one and why gimmicky ones are dumb. You'll also learn what to do if you are overwhelmed with content creation, social media, keeping up with the algorithms, all that. Mike is going to say something in here that might set you free a little bit and give you permission to go against the traditional social media advice. And then you'll also learn the importance of storytelling to stay not only top of mind, but as Mike puts it, buried in the hearts of your audience. So let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Mike Richeson. All right, Mike, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, so you have, I found you through Seth Odell, who was on the podcast several episodes ago. You used to work with Seth, I take it, and since have followed you, really enjoyed following you, and really just feel like you're a very interesting guy. and just very eclectic. I mean, like, on your LinkedIn profile, you like rode your bike all this long way, and then you were homeless on purpose and all this stuff. And then Seth told me some stuff about you too. Something about like, I don't know, you lived on a river or lived out of your car or out of your van or something like that. Oh
yeah, I lived out of a van for like a year now. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I just added the river part because that was like the SNL.
that one and free candy. I get that one a lot.
Yeah. So tell me about yourself. Just tell me who you are and what you do.
So I've had like a very strange sort of meandering career a little bit. I primarily started out as a journalist, and then when 2007 happened, I got laid off, and I thought, you know what? I love the work, but I hate the pay. I'm going into marketing because for some reason I thought marketers got paid a lot of money, and was not always correct on that one. But that was sort of my entry into higher ed because my first marketing job was actually for a university, and I forget my title there. I think I was like the managing creative something. I don't remember, but started there. And then I left after, 3 years, and that's when I did my bike trip. I rode my bike around the western U.S. For like 6 months, something like that. Came back, really kind of fell in love with video and started diving into that quite a bit, was doing some freelance work. And then I got a job at Nike. I'm just going to give you the Reader's Digest version here.
Yeah, go for
it. Started working at Nike, was helping them launch products online. And I started a podcast that made the news a couple of times. I started a YouTube channel that kind of blew up, and then I sold to like this really huge MMA retailer, and then they hired me to be their sort of like product video producer, and that was way more than I was making at Nike, so I left Nike. And then ended up like it was 2014, I think, and that was when Seth, who I had met in 2011, I think, at a conference in Vegas, he was at SNHU, and he said, "Hey, do you want to move to New Hampshire?" And I was like, absolutely not. I'm 0% interested in that. And he's like, "Oh, well, just hear me out. So we started talking about it, and that was when they were doing their big bus campaign, delivering diplomas around the country.
Yeah.
And the previous time, it was an amazing campaign, but like all they got was a commercial out of it. And this time they're like, we need like a digital and social kind of campaign to run side by side with it. So that was sort of what I was brought in to do, and it was amazing. We ended up doing 6 weeks in 30 some states, and this is a gigantic campaign. It was huge and super fun, and I'm still tired from it. And then after SNHU, I kind of went back to doing freelance stuff, and that was sort of the last bit that I'd really done in higher ed. And then I kind of always was somewhat in the agency space, somewhat in the freelance space. And then about a year ago, I finally just went, I just love film and that whole thing. I just want to do that. I kind of wanted out of the social consultant marketing realm a little bit, and I just sort of I wanted to focus on production because that's really my primary love, and so just went full time on that, and it's been almost a year now.
Yeah, I can tell you love it. I like some of the content that you post, like you sitting by the campfire and just answering questions that people send you, and you got like sound design, you're like throwing sticks down, and and just I like that, just sort of like travel vlog style. I've seen some of your other stuff too, where it's just like very just down to earth, but also it's you do a good job of mixing like a high production value with a down to earth approach, which I think is a great blend of the two spaces I think that we're in these days, between like TikTok and commercials.
Yeah. I appreciate that. That's definitely kind of on purpose. I like the conversational, sort of authentic, just me and you talking type of thing, but I'm also like a massive lighting nerd and I'm super OCD about it. So I set up, even that campfire thing, I have like 2 lights and a camera and like all this stuff set up, and it's overkill. It's so stupid, but it's like, I just love it. And every single platform so far starts as raw and authentic and choppy. And as you go, the production values get higher and higher and higher. And now YouTube is wildly high production. So is Instagram. So is, all these other ones. So it just gets there eventually. And I was like, I'm just going to start there, and eventually it's going to be just like this. So
yeah,
why not?
Yeah, so tell people, people are hearing about this campfire video and things like that. Tell people about the content that you make that people might see if they follow you on LinkedIn.
So I definitely talk about like some of it is useful, for marketers and things like that and other filmmakers, because I do talk about process, and I do talk about like just workflow and how to do things, whether it's like, hey, here's how I lit something, or here's how I shot something in particular, or here's like, a good thing to do if you're making videos. Here's bad stuff to avoid if you're making videos. And then a lot of it is just kind of like personal storytelling. Like I'll talk about, my stepson's birthday, or, my daughter's day out on the lake, or, I'll do the campfire Q&A thing because it's just like everybody wants to be Alex Hormozy and the cool swoopy, stuff. And for me, I'm just like, I just want to like sit down and talk to people and not pretend to be anything other than I am. And I'm like I'm a Montana kid. I'm a farm kid with city skills. And so it's just kind of those two things come together, and that's kind of why it's a little eclectic.
Yeah, Montana. I wanted to ask you about that. I was in Montana. I went fly fishing with my dad in Montana several years ago. It was super fun, gorgeous. And then obviously I'm sure everyone asks you if you watch Yellowstone. So
I have not seen it. No.
I feel like I'm pretty much I can teach you about Montana because I've watched Yellowstone. I did buy a $13 cowboy hat off of Amazon to watch that show. Nice. I was inspired by these like TikToks that were like one day of watching Yellowstone, and they're just like normal clothes, and it's like one week after watching Yellowstone, and their outfits just keep getting more and more ridiculous.
That's funny.
Yeah. So. Okay, cool. So tell us about the work that you do with your clients. What do you get paid to do today? That's obviously not higher ed.
So I kind of have 2 primary verticals. One is it's very kind of productized, retainer based type of thing. So what I'll do is like I'll work with a company, and we, rather than doing like, hey, I need a commercial, which I'll do project work, but Most of it isn't. But rather than that, what I do is like, hey, look, a lot of marketers are just under tremendous amounts of pressure. Like they have way more requests than they have resources. Every day somebody else wants something. And they just tend to just have a hard time fulfilling all these requests. And so a lot of times they'll go internal, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, depending on the skill set of people. Whereas I kind of come along and say, hey, look, every single month, we're going to sit down at the beginning of the month. You tell me kind of what you want. And then based on sort of our predetermined scope of work, I'll say, I can do this much of that for you. And then at the end of a year, 6 months, whatever the contract is, you have a pretty massive library of content that you can recut now for years. So we try to do stuff where it's like, yes, they're getting monthly content for social channels, marketing assets, their website, whatever, but also keep in mind that like, a year from now, what are you going to need to promote stuff? Because most companies have pretty predictable schedules. They know what events are coming up. And so at the end of that, they have, tons of photos, tons of videos, and I keep everything like, labeled, everything. So whenever they go, hey, we have the Boston Marathon's coming up again, I can instantly cut whatever they want because we shot it the year before. So that's the one vertical. And then the other one is very much the thought leadership, talking head type stuff. A lot of that's in the medical space and finance space. So I have clients that, once a month we'll do a session. I help them plan the topics. We go over everything. And then all they have to do is show up and talk about what they know. And then I edit everything and hand it to them for their accounts. So it's kind of those two primary verticals.
I like that. I like that idea of the thought leadership, like simple approach, just sit somebody down, let them just kind of dump their knowledge. And then you as the editor take that and kind of optimize it for social and stuff like that. And I love and like my philosophy too is probably yours, like similar to yours in that I feel like if a company is hiring a production company to do a commercial or a little mini story on someone, and they're not getting the footage to build a library with, they're just wasting so much money. I mean, like that's so much money spent on one piece of content that's probably not going to go viral. Right. People, it might, in my experience, like, the last production company I worked for, most of the clients would just post a video we do on YouTube, and then that was it. And then I'd check back a year later and had 200 views, and I'm like, really, that was it? Like we put our hearts into that. Like that was all, so at the very least, you got to get the footage and do stuff with that. Make it a whole campaign. Like you can make even just one little mini story can be a whole campaign worth of stuff around just this one person's story, and then repeat it.
I kind of think about, those sort of the bigger videos. For me, it's like, that's the product. And then like all the little stuff is kind of like the marketing around it. So it's like shoot teasers for TikTok and Instagram reels and all that stuff and point it all back to whatever the main thing is. And it's like, a lot of that stuff isn't a massive lift. I mean, it's not like you need to like do tons of extra work to do it. Most of it's just in the edit. So it's like, man, you have all this stuff and then they don't use it. It is really disappointing.
Yeah. Okay, so shifting gears here. So I saw a video today of just kind of prepping for this episode, and you had like, I don't know, it looked like a receipt roll or something, like a roll of paper, and you were talking about everyone's scrolling and stuff. So if you follow Mike Richeson, go check out his featured videos. They're very good. Tell us about that, because I thought that was a very great way of illustrating the way that people are scrolling, and I love the part where it's like, oh, here you are, oh, you're gone. So tell us about that. And that video actually had quite a bit of engagement on it.
Yeah, I think that was probably like my most successful post ever so far. I don't know what the views are, but it did really well. I mean, the whole idea was just like, it's not enough to just make something. It has to be something that people actually want to watch. And I know that sounds so simple to say, and it can be harder to do, but I don't think it's that complicated. It's just one of those things where you take a stat and you go like, I could have made a talking head video and said, hey, guess what, everybody? People scroll an average of 300 feet on their phone. That's the height of the Statue of Liberty. Don't be boring. But I kind of like try to weave in my own philosophies when I'm making videos. It's just kind of like almost proof of concept, where it's like, can I come up with a way to demonstrate this fact that is maybe visually interesting. And so for me, it was like, okay, I found a 300-foot roll of receipt tape and just started scrolling. And I was like, look, this is what people are doing on their phones all day long. And they're doing it this fast. It's just pop, 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 pop. It goes so fast. And then, so I traced out a phone shape on that printer paper and said, that's your 6 inches for the day. That's what they get. That's your opportunity to fail or succeed. And if you are just pumping out self-serving crap, to be honest, it doesn't have to look amazing. I'm not talking about production value. I'm just talking about the interest factor. If you don't do that, they're gone. And they're on to the next person who is going to do it. And your competition is the weirdo TikTokers and the YouTube videos. It's not just your competitors directly. It's like attention, attention, attention. And so for me, I just wanted to find a way to demonstrate that in kind of a tangible way. And people responded well to it. But the point was, it's like, this is your opportunity, and please care about it, because otherwise they're just gone.
Yeah, and what has really been like grinding my gears lately, as I'm scrolling, is the artificial hook points that people are trying to use all over my Instagram reels. It's like I'll scroll and then someone's like, "Hey, internet marketers," and they're like saying it really loud and really fast, or they're like coming at the camera, or they're like, in the next 5 seconds, I'm going to tell you how to grow your business by 500%. Like, it's just like, stop. It's like, just like, try something else. I'm like, that's actually making me want to scroll. And also when you say stop scrolling and listen to this thing, I am immediately scrolling. So it's like these artificial like call outs. I think that probably worked several years ago. Like the really like, oh, you're gonna clap and like really be in their face to get their attention and get them to stop.
Yeah.
But like it just looks like a gimmick, and I can tell it's a gimmick. But there is an art to hooking people with content that fits into their feed, that makes them want to keep watching, and that doesn't look like an ad. It's an instant giveaway if you're like, hey, internet marketers, that's, I know you're trying to sell me some course, and it's going to be free, and it's a free download, and I'm going to download it, and then you're going to spam me like ClickFunnels did on me recently. Oh my gosh, I can't even get off their list now because I downloaded some webinar thing that looked mildly interesting, and then I'm like, unsubscribe, like, anyways, So yeah, talk about that. Like, talk about like the difference between kind of a gimmicky hook and just something that kind of fits into their feed.
Well, it's funny. I'm actually working on a video right now about like how to create pattern interrupts that aren't annoying, because that's what they're trying to do. The problem is that like a pattern interrupt will become popular, and then it becomes the pattern. So it's like, right, okay, my pattern interrupt is now the same as these 5,000 other people doing the exact same pattern interrupt, and it just becomes instantly like scrollable, like you said. So it's like one of those things where, for me, I'm always like, how can I come up with sort of my own way to be interesting rather than copying what is super popular right now? Because in 6 months, marketers ruin everything. We all know your feed is going to be filled with the exact same thing over and over and over again. And for a while, I think the FTC shut it down. But commercials used to start with a white flash. That's what they do. Because if you weren't looking directly at the TV, you would see this flash of white, and you look back at it. And that's how they would start their commercials. And that carried over into the internet for a little while. So it's just like these things that sort of, they start out as legitimate pattern interrupts, and then they just become gimmicks because everybody's doing it. And so it's like, I'm just constantly going like, okay, I'm not against sort of like using what works, but at the same time, you have to fashion it to a way that's kind of uniquely you. Otherwise, you're just going to be another Me Too, hey, marketers, stop scrolling. And everyone's like, no, I'm out, I'm gone.
Yeah, it's hard. It's if you're just going to do a talking head, then you're limiting your options to, how can I say something outrageous or loud or fast or something like that that's going to get their attention. I feel like it's a little easier when you're incorporating some imagery, some visual, like B-roll or something like that. Have you ever read Brendan Kane's work? It's called Hook Point.
I don't think so.
All right, super good book. He talks all about that, just like It's called Hook Point. He talks all about creating content that hooks people and like what works, what doesn't, what you should try, what, things like that. It's super interesting. But anyway, yeah, it's a great book, and I think that people don't pay attention enough to that. We're very focused on the content itself, what we want to say, but then that front and then that back end is just kind of an afterthought. But I also feel like it can be kind of exhausting, to kind of always be thinking about how am I going to I almost feel like it's like, how am I going to manipulate somebody into watching this video, Oh, that's why I mentioned Brendan, because he talks about satisfying visuals, and ever since I read that, I noticed myself stopping on some paint dripping down or something, or someone squishing a cupcake or something in their hands. I mean, as long as it's relevant to the message, I'm like, okay, you got me on that one. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, just I call it just the two-sided hook. There's kind of the verbal, what are you going to say that sort of makes them go, oh, this is relevant to me and I care about it. But then also visually, what are you going to do to sort of grab their attention long enough to stop them from scrolling so that they actually hear your words or see them on the screen or whatever it might be. I love motion. So for me, if I'm doing a walk and talk, I do this constantly for anybody who actually watches my videos. I always start, if I'm holding the camera, I always start like this. I just move a little bit while I start to talk, or I enter the frame, even if it's a static shot, something that makes somebody go yeah, what's going on? Anything other than stop scrolling. Oh my God, it's the best thing you're ever gonna hear. Like that, I'm I'm just gone. So it's for me, it's more subtle. And I just try to go what can I do that's visually interesting while also confirming to them that this is something that you're going to be interested in watching.
Quick break here to tell you about how you can scale up your student and alumni success stories without taking on a bunch of extra work to manage with our video storytelling subscriptions. So look, making even one video, as we all know, it takes a lot of legwork and lots of steps to go through. It's expensive, and you got to do all the coordinating and everything. You got to hire a video vendor, you got to herd all the cats, and then you get usually one video out of that. But what if you could get a year's worth of storytelling content that you could use to highlight your various programs for the cost of maybe 3 or 4 one-off videos from a production company? But in this case, you have 132 videos at the end of the year to deploy in your various social media contexts. Well, that is something that you can do. At Unveiled, our aim is to take the friction out of telling great stories. So whether you're a big school or a small liberal arts college, you can tell really compelling stories all year round and fill your content calendar with video content. We get this done anywhere in the US. We batch shoot a year's worth of content and then every month drip out to you one new student or alumni story. And then we build a whole package of additional content around that student or alumni's story for the month. So you're going to get that full length story, which is usually 2 to 3 minutes. You'll get a 30 and a 15-second cut down to use in various shorter contexts, and then 8 topical videos, because while we have this student sitting here, we're going to make sure we get the most out of them, asking them about scholarships, asking them about career development opportunities, internship opportunities, how great the professors are, whatever it is. We'll work with your team on what are those things that we can really get out of each student, so we're maximizing that engagement opportunity and getting you the most content as possible. And then we're going to give you all the B-roll and all the interview content, all the raw stuff that you can take internally and repurpose till the cows come home. And there's a lot of additional content opportunities within that, unlimited amounts of whatever, TikToks, whatever you want to make. So head over to pricing.unveiled.tv to download our pricing guide. Unveiled is spelled Unveiled. The pricing guide has everything in it that you need to know, and if you'd like to chat further, you can book a call with me on our website, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. All right, back to my conversation with Mike Richeson. Okay, so here's a question that I think comes up for a lot of our listeners, is that, and I kind of mentioned, it can be overwhelming to constantly try to engineer your content in a way that's going to be effective. And I think for a lot of people, it's enough if they're just posting every day. It's like, that's hard enough. Now you're telling me I got to do better posts every day. And I'm like, I barely have any time to post. It's a miracle that I've posted 5 things in the last 5 days. So yeah, well, what do you say to marketers that may get this kind of advice of like, you got to do better, you got to do this different, blah blah blah, but they're already like, they already feel buried in content creation, and maybe they're seeing that it's not even working right away. You know, they're taking people's advice and it's not even paying off right away. So it's like, what's the point? What do you say to like overwhelmed marketers like that?
Do less.
Do less and do it better.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's sort of contrary, but like for me, you know, I look at someone like Mark Rober. He posts 1 video a month on YouTube, and he averages 20 million views, and he has for a long, long time. So it's like, okay, I understand that there's this pressure to produce content. I totally get it. I know how hard it is. I've been doing it for 20 years. But at the same time, it's like, I kind of think we've sort of hit, and I know there's the giant debate about quality versus quantity and all that stuff. And yes, if you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out what to do, quantity is wildly underrated. Just post. I don't care what it is. But at some point, you have to kind of be good at it. Mm-hmm. You know, the low-hanging fruit of, well, just post every day because nobody else is, like that dries up really, really fast. And at some point you have to find a way to stand out, whether that's the format, whether it's the topic, whether it's your unique, you know, POV on something, whatever it might be. You just kind of have to spend the time to think about, how do I do this? Like, you know, I go back to Ogilvy and his Hathaway shirts campaign, and he was just like, this isn't working, what do I do? I don't know, put an eye patch on the dude. And like all of a sudden it was this massive campaign because everyone's like, why is he wearing an eye patch? It's just the idea of intrigue. It doesn't even have to make total sense. I mean, obviously they created a character around it and things like that, but you know, for me, like the campfire Q&A, like there's no need for me to sit in front of a campfire and answer questions. It's just visually different than someone sitting in their office, you know, with the blue background or whatever and doing that. So it's just like, it doesn't have to be anything major. It just requires a little bit of thought to just go like, okay, what am I going to do that's unique enough that gets people to just kind of go like, what are they doing? What's going on there? Mm-hmm. So again, I think it gets overcomplicated tremendously, but I also understand that it's hard because you got to actually take the time to think about it. And most people are on such a pace that they just, stopping to think about anything becomes a luxury, and that's a whole nother topic. But yeah. I feel that in my own business too, where I'm like, as a one man band here, you know, I manage a lot of crews, freelancers, freelance editors and stuff like that. So like my time is already like taken up a lot. So like it's hard for me to find time to like create content for myself. And then much less have that be like really inspiring content, like stuff that I'm just like, you know, because I'm like putting my heart into like my clients' work. Yeah. Clients' work. My stuff takes all the back seat, and I'm just like, here's a little snippet from a podcast, you know. Which I mean, this always sounds weird when you know, I sell people on the idea of creating content, but it's like, for me, I believe my product will get me more work than me talking on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I did an experiment like where I was creating content on LinkedIn, and I get some leads occasionally, you know, from social media and stuff like that. But like when I just stop and create really good work and then I do consistent outreach, I make way more money than I do by posting on LinkedIn. So I think the product for me anyways, the product has to come first. It just has to, because if you have unhappy clients, it doesn't matter how great you are talking about yourself on LinkedIn. So I would, you know, the marketers out there that are stressed out and overwhelmed and all that stuff, just take a step back and go like, okay, what's my real priority here? And maybe producing content every single day isn't the right one.
Yeah, it's I just read, I'm like a decade behind on reading 4 Hour Workweek.
At least a decade, like 50
probably
years.
More than a decade. What is that? 2007. Yeah. I'm like almost 20 years behind. Yeah. And he talks about like he talks about like, think about like what you do, what are like the highest leverage tasks that are working, and why do we busy ourselves with stuff that everyone says we should be doing? And I think it was from this book, because I've read like 6 different books in the last month. I think it was from 4 Hour Workweek, where he talks about there's two. I think it was like Wilt Chamberlain and like another basketball player that would shoot free throws underhand because that worked.
Yeah.
You know, and they had like some, I don't know, highest free throw stats in the universe or something, versus all these people that want to look the part,
Right.
and are doing it in a way that's less effective. And I think about that a lot too. Like the times when I get stressed about content creation, and what I'm putting out there, I think about like, is this me trying to do what everyone says that I'm supposed to do? Or is this me doing this because this is the most effective way to grow my business? Or in higher ed, the most effective way to get students? Is it posting, you know, on TikTok 4 times a day like Gary Vee says that you should? Or is it like just really just like, I don't know, directly reaching out, directly, you know, talking to students, building community in a different way that prioritizes like meaningful connections over a quantity of connection, of like possible connection points, when you're just like blasting stuff to social media.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I just call it being boring at scale.
Yeah. Boring at scale.
It's just, okay. Congrats. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the spammers that will send you like completely irrelevant stuff. And it's like, I'm sure it works for 1 out of 5,000 emails they might get. Might get something. So it's like,
Well, it's always the whole thing of like, we want to be top of mind. And I hear this constantly, and I've been a part of agencies that pitch it constantly, that we're going to all this stuff to make people top of mind, top of mind, top of mind. And I understand the sentiment, and in part I do agree with it, but like, I don't want to be top of mind. Like, I want to be like buried in their heart. I want to be like, I want them to feel gratitude. Like when I watch something on that I really enjoy, whether it's a YouTuber or a movie or whatever, like I remember that experience as a positive one. And on the flip side, like I will never eat Skippy peanut butter if I'm starving to death and it's the last thing on earth. I'm just going out, because I was watching this incredible short film. It won an Oscar. It was about a guy who stutters. And like right at the climactic scene where you're going to find out if the hero's fears come true or not, bam, it cut to a Skippy peanut butter ad. And it's not Skippy peanut butter's fault. You know what I mean? It's just a programmatic buy. Somebody put it on there, whatever. I get it.
Sure.
But it made me so mad. Like, and this, when you say it out loud, it sounds irrational and stupid. Like, okay, dude, it was an ad, get over it. But like, I was so invested in that moment and that story. It was like somebody just walking up and punching you in the face while you're on a date. You know what I mean? And it was such a bad experience. And so even though it sounds crazy to say that out loud, that is how people respond to that stuff. And they remember it. Like they're just, I'm mad at Skippy peanut butter. Every time I see him in the store, I remember that story. I just go like, ugh, it just makes me mad. But on the flip side of that, like I want people to remember, you know, when they watch a video of mine that has, you know, it's just like this heartfelt thing about my daughter or a family member or whatever. Like I'm not there to go like, hey, if you need a video next time, stay top of mind. I just want them to go like, oh, hey, you know who like is good at sort of like eliciting emotions in video? That Mike guy. I watched this video about his daughter. Like, cause it's there. It's not here. It's there. And that's what I want to do. And that's what I wish people spent more time on, rather than just going like, well, they saw my logo.
Yeah.
Like, okay. They still don't care. But if it's like, man, if it's in here, like they care. And that to me is like the magic of the internet, where you have this idea and it's rattling on your brain and you like, man, I want to communicate it. How do I do this? And then you put it out there and people, strangers all over the world, give you feedback in real time, positive and negative. You got to take both. But it's like, to me, it's still kind of magic. And I love that process.
Yeah. Yeah. The logo thing too is like, it's so superficial. I get asked a lot of times to play on, you know, golf outings and sponsor golf outings for Unveiled, my company. And I'm always just like, I'd rather just pay the money to like golf. That would be more of an ROI than putting my logo on something. No one, no one's gonna care. No, even if I have a whole written sales pitch on a sign or whatever, no one's caring. They're there to play golf.
And they're gonna like talk to their friends and all that stuff, and they're not gonna remember your logo. It's like,
Yeah.
I run into this constantly. Every video they want it to start with like some title card that has their logo and all this stuff, and I can show
Or a
them all
drone
the
shot.
data in the world, and you're like, this kills retention. You're gonna do
Yeah.
all this work, and you're gonna bore the crap out of people because you want them to stare at your logo for 10 seconds before the content starts, and they're gone. So it's like you're doing all this work, and you're just sitting there as you do it. You're like, no one's going to watch this. I already know in advance. No one's going to watch this. And they're like, yep, but they saw the logo. And you're like, well, then just run a 10-second TikTok with your logo on it. I don't know what we're doing here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think that storytelling really has such a lasting impression, like emotionally. I remember, I don't know if I've told this story before on this podcast, but I've watched, back, my wife and I, before we had our biological daughters, we were getting into foster parenting. And my wife works in adoption, or worked then in adoptions. She's a trauma therapist now. But we were going through the classes to become foster parents. And then I got served, I think it was like a Vimeo staff pick of this movie called Removed. And it was this, storyboarded, like really like cinematic experience, following this young girl through multiple foster homes, and you're seeing her behaviors and you're seeing her act out, but you're seeing why she's acting out. Yeah. And you're seeing the reaction of the parents reacting to the behaviors and not to the reason for the behaviors, and like grabbing her by the arm and just like, you get over here, and that kind of stuff. And it just broke my heart. In my last job at the last production company, I had gotten there early, and I was just sitting at my desk, and I was just crying. I was just crying. And I texted my wife. I was like, oh, we're doing the right, like we have to do this. And then like my buddy comes in, and I'm just like wiping tears away.
Yeah.
And then so during that time we were watching these boring videos from the 80s or something on how to be a foster parent and, blah, 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 what to expect. And I sent them this Removed video, and they're like, we're replacing all the curriculum with this.
100%.
And it was just like, cause it was that powerful for me. And that's always like stuck out to me as like a pillar of like that, like storytelling, quality content, quality storytelling really moved me that catapulted me to action,
Oh yeah.
And I don't think that we can always do that. I mean, that was like $250,000, even then it was a low budget, but still a lot of money, to produce that with actors and everything. But it really is embracing what's beneath the surface, like finding stories to tell within your college, within your company or whatever, that have something deeper to say than, I liked the product and here's why I liked it and here's the problem it solved for me. But in my case, finding students that really, for their first generation college students, and what does that mean and how does that make them feel and how does that color their experience through college, and why is college such a elevated achievement for them because of that, and why do they love your school that much more because of that? Like that kind of stuff is so much better than just someone saying, I like my professors and and the small class sizes and I got a job afterwards, which is like, okay, we expect that you're going to get a job. It'd be like remarkable if you spent all that money and you didn't get a job.
Yeah.
So,
well, that was a huge reason that I actually kind of just left higher ed, because I started making this joke that's like, what do yoga instructors, youth pastors, and university commercials all have in common? It's like, if you've seen one, you've literally seen all of them. Like, It's the same tropes, the same beats, the same anthemic music, the same infomercial about why the college is amazing or whatever. And I'm just like, universities are a gold mine of stories. I mean, an absolute gold mine. You have this entire population coming to this place. Now it's more online, but still, like, you have this body of people who are like, they have dreams and they have goals and they're trying to accomplish them, and they want to do things that impact people in a positive way. And like, all the reasons that they're doing stuff, maybe they're like, first generation immigrants. And it's like, this is their whole family saved up to send this person to school. And, there's so many good stories. And it's like you said, you just kind of end up with like the exact same thing over and over and over again. And it's so frustrating to see that, because not only are the stories so incredibly diverse, like the opportunity for diverse storytelling is so radically diverse. And it's like, you're telling me that of all these people that you can't find somebody who's like Mark Rober-ish and, doing amazing experiments and showing like the products of their work, or like, you know what I mean? It's just like, there's so many opportunities to like, not only just tell stories, but tell them in like a very diverse way, and just sort of the way you bring it, rather than the standard, like, oh, I wanted to do this, but this was my struggle. And then I found this university and now I have a better life. And it's like, okay, cool. Could we try something else?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say like probably 8 out of 10 college YouTube pages that I go to have at the top is like their hero video, and it's a very similar sort of inspirational song. It opens with a drone shot, and then you'll see like some kids like ambling about the courtyard and in class. It's like this. It's like there's so much. I wonder if it's just like one company that's just that's just pumping these out. They've just got a monopoly on like the top of people's YouTube pages. But I contrast that with University of Oregon or Oregon, however they pronounce it, has had this video called "The Power of If." I think that's what it was called. And it was mostly, it was some like cinematic footage, but it was mostly just like really down to earth stuff that was just like almost user generated stuff, like the mascot high-fiving people, and people just a lot of action, sports, and just achieving their dreams or whatever. And it was just told in a way that was like really inspiring. And I'm like, that's what people need. Like, it does the same thing. It's an overview video, but what that does is not tell us here's why this is a great school. It just says like, I'm just going to give you the feeling of this being a great school and let you make your decision.
Yeah, totally.
Cause it just, the University of Oregon video, it just like, it leaves you feeling with like, that is an environment I want to be in, Yeah.
And it's centered around real concept. I think that's what a lot of people miss with storytelling, is that they go like, well, I don't know, we found somebody with a good testimonial, put him in front of a camera, and that's a great story. And you're like, okay, but like sometimes when you're doing more conceptual stuff, you have to have an idea behind it. And that's what I loved, working with like Seth and our creative director, DJ at SNHU, was that it was constantly just like, it's not enough to just make something. It's like, it needs to have the idea behind it, and it has to have a concept behind it, because without that foundation, it's just kind of like another random story that I may or may not care about. And it can get very drifty, and it just doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like this thing you put into the ether, and it's like, well, it might mean something, but it probably doesn't.
Yeah. We were talking before we recorded that, I mean, you kind of approach content differently, but you just approach business differently too. And even just like getting specific with who you're talking to. And I messaged you, I said, does Homestead Production have a website? Because I'm Googling Homestead Production. I'm finding all these like companies that like help you like live on a farm or something like that. How to grow your own potatoes and make compost. But you're like, no, I don't have a website. So tell me about that, because I think that's interesting. I think you have a perspective on things where it's like, I'm gonna do what works. It's different, and it works, and I don't really care if I'm supposed to have a website or whatever. So just tell me about that.
Yeah, I used to have one, and then I was like, this is dumb. I don't get any work this way. It's a pain. I hate doing website stuff anyways. And after being at, I've worked at quite a few agencies, and we would always have production companies come in, and the first thing they do was show us their reel. It was never interesting. Just because it's just like this collection of stuff I'm like, okay, this doesn't really tell me anything other than like you can get a nice shot, and who can't do that? So it's like, great.
Right.
But it doesn't tell me anything about like the complete work you do, or like sort of like why you do it, or the results behind it, or things like that. So for me, I'm just like, I'm not going to do all this stuff, put together a reel, have a prospective client land on it and just go like, okay, I need to wade through this stuff and figure out if they do what I need. And I was like, I always go back to, I don't know who came up with it, but it's just like the confused mind says no. So for me, I'm just trying to eliminate confusion at every step of the way. So if I have somebody that reaches out to me, or a referral, or if I'm doing direct outreach, I will, and I have like 5 or 6 templates sort of lined up. I just use Card. It's like the cheapest. It's like $20 a year or something like that for my website. And I just sort of have these sort of pre-built. And if somebody, from healthcare or whatever, I just sort of put those assets that speak directly to them and say, here's exactly what I've done for other healthcare companies or whatever it might be. Here's how I do it. Here's the results. Bop, there you go. And that way they're not wading through a bunch of crap that they just don't care about. Because for me, again, it comes back to the whole thing. It's like, if they get annoyed, they're gone. If they get bored, they're gone. If they get confused, it's over. So I'm just like, I don't want any of that to stand in between me and work. So that's how I do it. I'm not saying that's the way to do it or even recommending it. It's just that's kind of how it works for me, because I can customize it. And like I said, a lot of times I'll put I'll just record a short, very personalized video for the person who's going to be coming to that page, and I'll just embed it at the top and send it on its way.
Yeah, I like that idea of personalization though, because I think that's that's where a lot of things are going. And I read this. I mentioned on the podcast before. I read this book called I can't remember. I always forget what the book is called, and I have to like search my library up here. Anyway, it's Marketing to Gen Z, and they're talking about how they like a personalized experience, and like how everything for them on social media, they like everything to be kind of customized to them, and then that on top of like, I know Don Miller from Building a Story brand, he's always like, if you confuse, you lose, and like, don't make people burn calories, to try to figure out what it is that you do. And I think a lot of times too in higher ed, like we try to be very highbrow, and artsy and flowery with our language. It's like, what is the value that I'm supposed to get out of this? Like you should be able to just know exactly, like in a couple sentences, what it is that a company does or a school, the value a school provides. But it's like the trying to just be real artsy and
I remember I was in Germany once on a school exchange for like a month, and I'll never forget this. I was in like a marketplace in Germany, and I was hanging out with my friends and things like that. And like, I heard English. Someone was speaking English like a ways away. And I was like, instantly, I was like, "Whoa, I speak English." Like, it just grabbed me out of like, all these conversations going on in German. Like, I heard English words and it just like, whoomp, I just zoned in on it. And it's kind of like, that's one of the ways that I sort of approach personalization and content and things like that, where it's like, I want to not necessarily be the thing that everyone listens to, but when they hear me and it's the right person, I want them to go like, bam, that's for me. Like, that is it. Because it was just like, I'll never forget that moment where it's like, man, of all the conversations, I picked out that one, and they weren't talking to me. So it's like, if you can do stuff like that, because like, this too, like with video stuff, I don't need 12,000 sales a year to have a great year. I need 10. You know what I mean? Yep. So for me, taking a little bit of time to personalize stuff and do it, like the outsized ROI of that is so good that it's like, I wouldn't do it any other way, really.
Yeah, that's great. So what would be, kind of closing thought here, like what would be your charge to higher ed marketers? Like what is it that we're not doing enough of, we should be doing more of? Open-ended question. What would be your encouragement to higher ed marketers?
Oh man, I don't think the problem is higher ed marketers. I think it's higher ed admin. That's the real barrier. Like, and I'm not trying to like crap on anybody, but for me, in my experience with quite a few universities, it's like, if they just internally embraced the values that they externally shout to the rooftops, I think university marketers would have a much easier time doing their job. I don't think there's like a, I used to joke back in the day that, like, if you're a university marketer, you could be 10 years behind the times, but still 10 years ahead of university marketing. And I think that gap, I think, has closed a lot. I've met so many smart marketers in the higher ed space, and it's not their issue. It's the admin that just, they talk about innovation, but they won't be innovative in their storytelling. They talk about, like, all these values that the university incorporates, and then when it comes to sort of like promoting it, it's just like, nope. And they kind of lock you into these kind of traditional fear-based, very like, well, what if we make somebody mad? What if we, and it's like it's the internet. Somebody's going to be mad. Just don't care.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, unless you're trying to make people mad, that's a problem. But just because somebody gets mad at you, if it's like someone that you're never going to appease anyways, don't care about them. Don't care about them. Just care about the people who are going to care about you. So for me, it's like, I don't have like a magic bullet. I don't think that there's like some giant strategy that all the higher ed marketers are missing out on and things like that. I think they just are beating their heads against the wall when it comes to the admin. Honestly, like, I don't totally know how to solve that. That's why I don't do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff comes into play a lot, where it's just like you're sort of, the gatekeepers are above the people that are kind of managing the video, and so it just gets, by the time it gets to them, it just kind of gets like watered down, and it's like, we can't, we don't want to offend this person or that person, and
when it's, it's that old saying that, like, there are no statues to committees. And unfortunately, and I understand why, like, people want to be collaborative and do all these things, but at the end of the day, somebody has to have a vision that carries something through, especially for creative work. And you have to hire people that you trust and give them the reins to fail. And because it's not, even when they fail, the stakes are pretty low. You know what I mean? Right. I mean, I get the money and all that stuff, but the stakes are pretty low when it comes to failure on the internet. And so it's like, you have to give somebody the creative point and say, you're in charge of this project. You're the final say. Obviously, we'll give our feedback and things like that. But this idea that you send a video to the Borg and then it gives you feedback and then you have to please all these different people, you're instantly going to just create junk. It's going to suck. It's going to be boring. It's going to be lukewarm. It's going to appeal to nobody. It's going to make nobody mad. And it's just like the perfect university product where it's just like nobody cares and they love it. So it's just like, you're like, okay, I guess. But yeah,
the measurable becomes not if their audience will love it, but if the leadership loves it, then you succeeded.
Right. Like, well, you're not the target audience, so I don't care if you like it. Does the market like it?
Dude, it's great having you on the show. Where can people connect with you at?
LinkedIn.
Okay.
That's probably the easiest way. Like I said, I don't have a massive web presence. I have, an Instagram account that I occasionally post to, and a LinkedIn account, and that's kind of it.
All right, awesome. We'll go check out Mike's stuff on LinkedIn. I encourage you to check out the content that he posts and the wisdom that he shares on LinkedIn. But yeah, this was great. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. Definitely go follow Mike's stuff. Go follow him on LinkedIn, and you'll get a lot of good learning from him if you just watch the content that he creates. It's really interesting. And so 3 things I want to give you before you go. Reminder to go to pricing.unveiled.tv if you're interested in learning more about our subscriptions and how that can help alleviate a lot of the stress from your content creation efforts, from your marketing team, while scaling up the output significantly of really quality content, emotion-driven content. And so pricing.unveiled.tv. Go pick that up. Number 2, if you want to take the storytelling that you're already doing to the next level, or you want to incorporate storytelling into your strategy to begin with, I have a free resource for you. It's a 3-part framework for creating compelling student and alumni testimonials, and you can get it at unveiled.tv/student testimonials. And that doesn't even have to be for video. Just put the framework to use in any format in which you tell student and alumni outcome stories. Number 3, I would love for you to leave a review for this podcast because it helps me out a ton, helps people find this thing in the first place. Thanks for listening. My name's John Azzoni. Go connect with me on LinkedIn. In the meantime, we'll catch you on the next episode of the Higher Ed Storytelling University Podcast. Thanks.